what the ISA advocacy team is facing as the top sign code issues so far this year. And you'll get to participate in a discussion about your permitting and regulatory concerns. So before we get started, I wanted to share a few things about the SSSA and ISA. Our goal is to stay engaged with you and provide important updates. You should be getting emails from us regularly, and also make sure to follow us on social media too. Remember, Southern State Sign Association members can contact C Management for any of your HR questions throughout the year. They're an incredible benefit, incredible resource that goes along with your membership in the association. We also have member spotlights where any member can complete a short questionnaire and be highlighted on our social media page. This is a great way to bring attention to your company, one more component of your social strategy. Have you completed a recent project or gotten a promotion or given a promotion? Or do you have any other success stories in your business that you'd like to share? Contact the association office if you want to be recognized. We've also continued the safety meeting information that your company needs to meet through your state and federal OSHA regulations. And as a local sign company, you'll also have membership with the International Sign Association through your affiliation with Southern States. Excuse me. So they have a ton of resources for you in your business. I own a sign shop called Sign Brothers up here in Athens, Georgia, and we are rebranding branding for the first time a wayfinding system throughout downtown Athens, and the Sign Research Foundation put together an information packet for wayfinding that was incredibly helpful with us to win that job. So I'm excited about upcoming our fall conference, September 30th through October 2nd. At the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort in Orlando, Florida. No more virtual. More information will be publicized soon, but please mark that on your calendars and save the date. Hope to see y'all there. Wanted to go through a few housekeeping items before I get started too. As an attendee, you do have the ability to raise your hand to ask questions or type in the chat box. However, please keep yourself on mute during the program until someone calls on you. So today, well, we'll get into it. We are happy to have James Carpentier, who is the current Director of State and Local Government Affairs with the International Sign Association. In this capacity, James works with and educates local officials and planners in the creation of beneficial and effective sign codes. James is a national speaker and author on issues related to the regulation of signs. Prior to that, James was the owner of Carpentier Consulting, LLC, where he specialized in sign variances, entitlements, and sign legislation. In addition, James was the Director of Government Relations for a national sign company. James also has over 25 years experience as a certified planner in the public and private sectors. We also have David Hickey with us today, Vice President of Advocacy of the International Sign Association, where he oversees and coordinates ISA's legislative, policy, and legal efforts. David's main goal in his professional life is to educate and influence government officials so they understand the value of signs and help enact regulations so that the sign industry, our customers, and communities ultimately benefit. Since 2011, David and his ISA advocacy team have educated over 7,000 local officials, and they've helped hundreds of jurisdictions all over America develop reasonable and beneficial sign codes. So please join me in welcoming James Carpentier and David Hickey.
Thanks, Michael. Let me bring up, okay. It says my internet connection is unstable. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Hey, good morning. I think it's still morning. I just wanted to say, first of all, I can't wait to go to your fall conference. I'm ready to get out and about. Hopefully I will get an invitation to that. Welcome to the Southern States Lunch and Learn. I hope everyone has a good lunch today. And I think we're going to learn hopefully a thing or two. And let's save questions for the end. for the end of this presentation. Like Michael said, I'm David Hickey with ISA, and we wanted to talk about the top sign code trends that we're seeing in your region, in your neck of the woods, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And one way that we tried to sort of get some background on this, we had a quick, let me see here. Oh, it's not letting me advance. Let me try something else. Hold on one second. Okay, we had a quick survey of southern states sign companies. We had 15 participate, which is a pretty good number considering the short time frame. And the top issues that we ascertained from your survey results and from what we've been working on are permitting problems, read-related issues, the digital dilemma when it comes to EMCs, and sign lighting limits. And then now James and I are gonna talk about a few of these issues. And right now I'll hand the ball off to James.
Thanks a lot, David, and welcome everybody. It's great to be here. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. Well, as you know, many jurisdictions are really providing services remotely, and that has been a challenge in and of itself, let alone everything else that's been going on. And I think what has added a lot of difficulty is that a lot of jurisdictions have budget issues too, combined with that, and that some have cut staffs a little bit. And I think really what I've seen is the jurisdictions that have had permitting online prior to COVID really had a jump on the game, and they have been able to provide services in a much more smooth and quick fashion than others that were trying to catch up and figure out what to do because everything's remote. And what I have noticed too with those jurisdictions that have provided online services, even if they use the same software, they customize it to whatever they want. So you could have the same software in two different jurisdictions and they can look entirely different. And one thing that I would suggest you might want to talk to your officials, if it's a little perplexing, I think sometimes they don't put out enough information on that exact process and how to go about getting your permit, literally. So, I mean, I think if they outline that process really clearly online, just because of the differences between each jurisdiction, that'll really help out. So I would encourage you to, if it's unclear, you're not sure, that they provide that information. Because I know I certainly have difficulty when I'm looking at those processes to determine exactly what that is. And the other part of that too, in addition to the permitting problems, is the fees. Now, due to the budget increases that I just mentioned, we've seen some jurisdictions, and I'd be curious to see if you've been running into any of this down in your neck of the woods, if you've seen any permit fee increases. And really, the bottom line is they can't use the permit fees as a way to try to get a source of revenue. Those fees really need to be related to the services provided, as far as administration and enforcement of the permit system. If they're going above and beyond that, that's something you can let us know about. We'll do whatever we can to help bring those fees in line, because they know that they're not supposed to do that. I think most of the planners are aware that that's not the correct way to have a permit fee system. Next.
Thanks, James.
Yep.
The next trending issue that we've been working on and anticipate increasing in 2021 and beyond are read-related issues. And what do I mean by that? I mean, fallout from the Reed versus Town and Gilbert case, Supreme Court case from 2015, which said that sign codes can't be content-based. The government cannot regulate speech based on the content of the message. And even though this was coming on 6 years ago, this is still a trending issue because there have been all sorts of federal court cases further elaborating on this decision. Nowhere is this more relevant to our industry than what courts are considering now with the on-premise, off-premise distinction. And just some quick background. Many of you know that it's been for 50 years or longer, the government has had the ability to regulate on-premise signs differently than billboards. And we think this is a really good thing. ISA thinks that this is a good thing. Both kinds of signs have different purposes, different owners, and many other different aspects. So we feel like that they should continue to be regulated in a different way. And this has been affirmed by the Supreme Court over the years. And I think to our benefit, we don't want to be treated like billboards. And if there's anyone who thinks that we should be treated like billboards, raise your hand. I'd be happy to talk with you about it at the end of this when we do Q&A. But this is something now billboard companies in the aftermath of Reed have been suing states and cities, saying that the traditional on-premise, off-premise distinction is a content-based distinction and therefore unconstitutional. And surprisingly, many of these courts are agreeing. So they're knocking down sign codes and state DOT regulations, differentiating between the two kinds of signs. And we think that this is a bad thing. And what does it mean for the sign industry? Well, it especially affects us when it comes to digital signs. And because that is going to be the main issue involved here with the on-premise, off-premise distinction. This is especially true. There was a case in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, City of Austin, allowed on-premise digital signs and was not allowing any new digital billboards. So you had two large billboard companies sue Austin. The Fifth Circuit found that it was a content-based distinction and illegal, therefore illegal. So now all the states in Texas, all the cities in Texas and in the other Fifth Circuit states, Mississippi and Louisiana, can't differentiate between those two kinds of signs. And what does that mean for our industry? Well, it could mean several things. It could mean that we can find a way around it and we can still sort of differentiate between the two kinds of signs without it being content-based. As the court sees it, we can say, according to how big the sign is, or who owns the sign, or does it derive revenue, as billboards often do. So maybe we could come up with regulations that distinguish between those two kinds of signs, or city or the government can start treating those two kinds of signs on and off-premise digital the same. And this could go two different ways. It could say, okay, we are allowing digital billboards and EMCs, but they both have the same exact hold time. There are spacing issues involved. If a parcel can only have one digital sign, maybe it'll be the digital billboard, not the on-premise sign. Maybe they have to be, all kinds of signs have to be certain sizes. So they could treat them the same that way, or they can go to the extreme and they can say, okay, in our jurisdiction, we're not going to have any digital signs at all, billboards or on-premise signs. And that we think is probably the worst case scenario, but it's definitely a possibility. We haven't seen that yet, but we will see. So where we are with the Austin case, the city of Austin is appealing the Fifth Circuit's decision to the Supreme Court. And we are hoping that the Supreme Court takes it up and clarifies once and for all that the on-premise, off-premise distinction is content neutral, that it's okay for cities to differentiate between the two kinds of signs. We should know in the next month or so, 4 to 6 weeks, whether the Supreme Court's going to take up that case. Now, there's no court decisions in the southern states region that deal with this, but believe me, even if the Supreme Court doesn't take up the case, areas, jurisdictions in your region are going to say, well, other cities are getting rid of the distinction, so maybe we should consider this as well. I know it's going to be the talk of planners and municipal lawyers across the country, and so it's going to create a lot of uncertainty for our industry, which is why we're hoping that the Supreme Court takes up this case and rules one way or another, so we can have clarity once and for all. Here is the next issue, James.
Thanks, David. The digital dilemma, it really is and continues to be one of the top regulatory issues that we face on a regular basis throughout the country. And what we see is that the issues are often the regulations are outdated, really old, and just don't work anymore, or they just don't have any at all. And fortunately, sometimes we find jurisdictions that are really interested in having EMCs. On occasion, it goes the other way too, and some jurisdictions are looking to severely restrict the EMCs, and that's something that we're trying to stay on top of all the time. But I think the important thing is to know is that the EMCs, just overall, it's a hot topic, and it has been for a number of years, and we expect it to continue to be because the costs have continued to come down. They're a little bit more affordable. So we see a lot of end users that want to have them, and some jurisdictions because of that are considering them now. And I think it's a good time too, given the economic times and things that are going on, in relation to COVID and whatnot, to have the flexibility that EMCs allow is really incredible and great. So we have a lot of really good arguments in the positive side of this technology. And I just want to mention a little bit about a story in Orlando that goes back a little while. Back in a few years ago, we had a workshop in Orlando, and we had a planner from the city of Orlando attend that workshop. And as a result of that, we had a desire from the county, and the city officials there had a desire to have EMC regulations that are consistent. And if anyone knows iDrive in Orlando, you've got situations where you've got city and county lands with areas in the city of Orlando where they're not allowed, and you've got the county where they are. So there's a huge disparity between the regulations right now and between city and county. So we met with city and county officials as a result of that, including some SSA members, and one that happens to be on the call right now. I think Ken was in that meeting, Ken Sode. And there we discussed, that issue in particular was really the focus of that meeting. And subsequently, the city indicated in early 2020 that they had a desire to expand EMCs to allow them not only in iDrive, but I think in some cases maybe community-wide. So I think because of COVID, that has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. And now we're continuing to kind of urge the city to pick this up again. And hopefully we're going to see some action on this year. We'd be thrilled to see that happen in the city of Orlando. But I think that's just a great story on what can happen with some of the efforts that we've done in the past in relation to like some of our workshops and whatnot. So that's if you're dealing with a jurisdiction that does have outdated regulations or they're looking to update their code, let us know, because that's something that we do all the time. And I think that's something that, like I say, it's a good time for us to be, arguing on behalf of the industry and this technology for everyone.
All right, thanks, James.
Yep.
The fourth trending issue that we think is going to have a big impact on our industry in 2021 and beyond is sign lighting limits. And this is something that we've seen over the past few years, but it was especially regarding digital signs or EMCs. And we think that we handled that pretty nicely with ISA's EMC nighttime brightness recommendations, which I hope most of you are familiar with, and that's our 0.3 foot candles above ambient lighting, or about 323 nits. And these sign lighting recommendations have been adopted by nearly 300 local jurisdictions, and I think 8 or 9 state DOTs. So it's really been a reasonable solution to the hot button issue of EMC brightness. But unfortunately, what we've been also seeing recently is cities wanting to mandate lighting levels for internally illuminated signs. And that's been a lot tougher for us to deal with because we don't have research on it. There are way too many variables to take into consideration when it comes to sign lighting for, for cabinet signs and that kind of traditional lighting. And we are not recommending to cities that they try to mandate lighting limits for those kinds of signs, but many of them are going ahead anyway. Maybe some of you have seen that. But now recently something far more alarming than just these individual cities have come about. And I'm talking about sign lighting standards that have been developed by the Illuminating Engineering Society, which are lighting experts, and then adopted by ANSI as standards. And so it's these sign lighting standards, RP 3919. And basically the gist of these sign lighting limits is that they establish lighting zones, and you can see the nit levels that they recommend for all signs, all illuminated signs, not just EMCs, but cabinet signs, channel letters, probably even externally illuminated signs as well. And you can see that the highest level of nighttime lighting that they have is 160 nits, which is basically half of what we've been recommending for EMCs, and very low for internally illuminated signs as well. And that is for lighting zone 4, which is the most busy commercial activity type zoning area that would have a lot of competing lighting as well. And you can see it goes as low as 20 nits. And then it also has ridiculous daytime lighting levels standards of 3,500 nits, which, as many of you might know, is not enough to compete with the sun for digital signs, and it's just completely unworkable. And that's the main theme of the ANSI sign lighting standards that were developed, by the way, without the input of the sign industry, is that these sign lighting standards are completely unworkable and impractical, and they're way too restrictive. However, the problem is, everyone knows what ANSI is. Everyone views ANSI as a credible resource. And if localities start adopting these sign lighting standards, then the sign industry is going to face a critical threat. If local jurisdictions start adopting these sign lighting standards, which I think we can all agree are far too low, and start making signs having less pop and visibility at night and during the day for EMCs, are businesses going to want to buy these signs or invest in them as much as they usually do? I don't think so. So we view this as an incredible threat to the well-being of our industry. Never mind the traffic safety implications from having illuminated signs this low. Fortunately, only a few communities have adopted these ANSI sign lighting standards, and they're usually the dark sky communities out west. We did in December have a major Midwest city adopt these sign lighting levels. So we view this as we need to do something very quickly. And so we are working with industry stakeholders to work with a researcher to field test these standards to prove that they're unworkable and impractical and too low. And we're hoping to come out with those results by the end of this year. And we might even take it a step further to try to totally debunk these ANSI standards and to make them basically go away. That's going to be a longer term process that goes into 2022. But nevertheless, the fact remains that this is a key sign code trending issue that we're seeing across the country. I'm not really sure how it's going in the southern states region. If anyone has any insight and is seeing this sort of sign code development, let us know. Certainly, if you see lighting levels being proposed that are this low, 160 nits for the most areas of a community, you have to let us know as soon as possible so that we can help fight them.
Mhm.
One positive thing about these sign lighting standards is that they're terrible, and they're based on research that is irrelevant and that is obsolete. And we have a great opportunity to provide research that is going to completely debunk them. And we're working with the Sign Research Foundation to get that done. But again, one thing you'll be hearing from us is that you find out about this in the course of your work. Please let us know as soon as possible so that we can help you fight it. James?
Thanks, David. I just want to reiterate that being in Arizona, that those standards are popping up here and there. And we, in the interim, before we get that study done that fights what this unreasonable standard is, we do have some arguments. So yeah, as David said, let us know if you run into anything that looks anything like that. We're here to help. So our outreach to planners, I mean, we have done planning for sign code success workshops in the last couple of years in Orlando, Durham, Atlanta, and most recently Doral, Florida, reaching about 144 planners. And really what these, if anyone's familiar with these workshops, and I hope you've heard of them, they're provided for planners to really give them the tools and information they need to hopefully reasonably regulate signs. And we've reached through these workshops about 100 jurisdictions in your region, which is great. And we're looking forward to providing the Planning for Sign Code Success workshops this year. And we think it will most likely be a virtual format. We're still working through that to figure out exactly how that's going to look and be. So we anticipate that later in 2021. And it's also interesting to note that as the SRF Scholars Program in your region, we've had 17 scholars. And what this program is, it's a really unique and a really inspirational and practical educational type of program that brings together a lot of different professionals, urban planners, landscape architects, code officials, designers. And what they do is they literally, it just creates a lot of synergy, a lot of interest, and a lot of understanding between what each profession does. And it's a great learning experience. And we suspect that that's going to also happen in another format this year. We're not sure exactly how it's going to look, but we're figuring that out, as a lot of other folks are, as far as how they're delivering, educational opportunities. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, David.
Okay, thanks, James. All these issues that we just talked about, permitting, READ-related issues, problems with EMCs and sign lighting standards, we have to be able to work with sign companies from your area to learn about these issues and to work on them, because if we work together, we're going to be way more effective. The issue is that you are our eyes and ears on the ground. You have the expertise that we need, the knowledge of the local jurisdictions, so that we can find out about these sign code issues and work with them together on it. You're the ones who can get local businesses, your customers, involved. We all know that when we appear before local officials to change a sign code or to prevent something bad from happening, we're just the sign industry. We just want to sell more signs is what they think. Well, if we get your customers, retailers, local mom and pop shops to show up and say that they want the sign code to be better, they want these revisions done, they want this provision stopped, they're going to listen more to them than to us. And hopefully in many cases you have contacts with local officials, planners, city council members, people like those, decision makers when it comes to sign regulations. So we cannot do it without you and without your help, without your being involved. And we've worked together with several people on this call right now who we couldn't have gotten things done without them. And it's just, again, a great synergy, as James said, to learn about these issues, keep your eyes and ears open, and then to get us involved and to work on it. And you can do that by, certainly you can talk to Christina first and then get the rest of there. But if you want to email us directly, you can contact us at our email addresses. And then if you want resources so that you can work with your local officials, check out signs.org. There's a couple links here. And certainly we've mentioned the Sign Research Foundation a few times during this presentation. Check out their website. They have great resources that you can educate local officials and yourself about sign code issues, but it also has great resources so that you can educate your customers and your potential customers about the value of signs and the ROI of signage. So those are the main issues that we see trending in 2021. Now we can open up the floor for some questions.
Dave, I actually have 3 questions for you.
All right.
Probably simple answers, but back to the sign lighting you were discussing a moment ago. I've seen that happening here. I think a couple of years ago, Osceola Kissimmee area, they have now changed their sign faces have to either be opaque background or they have to be externally illuminated. That's one issue. We just recently ran into an issue in a new sign we put in Maitland that there was some concern about the lighting, and we had to provide a lot of lighting specs and so forth. And they were looking towards those standards. That being said, question number 1, have you seen this expanding around the country?
Yes, we have definitely seen that, especially with the opaque backgrounds. And we've seen national companies redo their branding and their signage, like Taco Bell, for example. I've seen they've changed the color of their signs to fit more of these sort of dark sky requirements. And we don't have any problem with businesses independently, voluntarily doing things like that. What we care most about is that cities don't require businesses to make their signs less visible at night. And we really want them to know that we're the experts on how signs can function, including visibility at night. So we're really working with them on this, but that is something that we've seen. And I know that James has probably seen that a lot out west.
Yeah.
Question number 2. Who drives that? Who is driving this information to this group that gets ANSI to accept these things? You have any idea?
Well, 2 things. When it was being developed by IES, the Illumination Engineering Society, they had people there that are definitely anti-sign illumination. They had folks who from Dark Skies involved in it. So that's who was behind it in the first place. Now, when we come up with our research, then we are going to work with ANSI to drive it, to try to come up with, at the very least, an alternative sign lighting standard that the industry came up with, with a very credible researcher who we found. And then at that point, we're going to take it through the ANSI process, which is going to be long and difficult and possibly expensive. But this should be probably one of the top priorities of the sign industry, to get this done and to come up with research and standards that counter what IES came up with.
Yeah, I just add that I think that standard really was pushed by the International Dark Sky Association, since I think the guy that was the head of that group was the former president, I believe, right, of IDA, International Dark Sky. So I think that's where this really came from. And that standard is really, as David said, it's not scientific, it's a more of a political type of standard, which, as David said, there's really the basis of it just isn't there. So.
Do you know, did they request any input from the sign industry at all when they were developing this?
Nope.
They did not.
Not at all.
Kind of thought so. You actually answered my third question, was how can we get involved with that? And I think you already said that the Sign Research Foundation is working on that.
Yeah, we are just about finalizing the contract with the researcher, and I will say that there's going to be a cost associated with it. So any way that you can contribute to the foundation, and you can specify that your donation, which is tax deductible, be allocated for this particular research. And I just view it as a worthwhile investment of any sign company to contribute to SRF for this particular, well, for all SRF research, but this especially because if this gets promulgated, nationwide or in Florida or in Georgia, it's going to affect your bottom line. So it's a small price to pay for a contribution to SRF to help defeat these sign lighting standards.
Yeah, and just so you know, the International Dark Sky, they promote this standard. They have it posted on their website, and they're pushing for it everywhere. And the more, like David said, you let us know about anything that you see that looks anything like that, we'll be all over it as quick as we can to try to stop it.
Yeah, well, because it has caused some conflict here, and even some conflict between us and customers in some instances, in particular the down in Osceola County with the opaque background, because you had people in what was brought it up really was a sign that we did for a Howard Johnson's, and they would not allow them to have their logo illuminated. The only part of their logo that could illuminate was just the word Howard Johnson. It took a little work and finagling. We finally got what we wanted, and they got to put most of their logo on there. But it caused some issues with the customer as well, and caused a lot of issues with the county and the city. But hopefully we can step up and get input in this and have some reasonable heads pushing this.
Yeah, I would imagine that most customers would want their signs to pop at night and to be seen by potential customers from as far away as possible. And these kinds of sign lighting restrictions don't help.
Great. So that's all I had.
All right.
I got one. How can we more easily find sign codes and permitting processes for smaller towns?
Well, I'll try to take that one, because I agree, for smaller towns, sometimes it is a real challenge to find their codes and their processes online, because that's all I do is look at various codes and processes online, and sometimes those small jurisdictions, it's really difficult. But what I would say is sometimes you'll find, part of the issue too is sometimes the sign regulations might not be in the sign code. Sometimes, and not all the time, I'd say it's the exception, not the rule, you'll find regulations that are outside of the zoning code. So if you look in the municipal code, I would say the first search I do when I'm looking for codes is I'll take a look at the municipal code and go from there, because usually, it's pretty unusual not to find it, you can find the municipal code in any jurisdiction online. And then you go from there to, it could be under development regulations or development code or zoning code, or like I said, it could be separate regulations too within the municipal code. But if you start that as your number one search, usually you can find the regulations somewhere. They have to be in there somewhere. It's just a matter of where they are. And sometimes it's not so readily either available or evident of where those are. But if you keep digging there, you will find them. And the permitting process, that's not going to always be clearly in the municipal code. And that's one, sometimes they might not have much online, and you might just have to call them. They could have very little online. Sometimes they don't have an online process at all. Or if they do, it's very rudimentary. Some of these places may just have maybe like a simple email thing or whatever they could set up in the interim, if they don't have a permitting process, especially those smaller jurisdictions, or they could be working with a consultant too. So in some of those cases, you just, I would suggest just seeing if you can get a hold of somebody, which I know that can be a struggle too, but there's no easy answer for that other than just keep plugging away at it. And for a lot of those jurisdictions, I would give a call, especially with the permitting process itself, because that might not jump out real easily. You know, it could be like hardly anything there, or they may list a consultant's name or something too. So,
and I'd also just add, you know, if you're a Southern States member, you're an ISA member, and which means you have access to people like James and myself and Kenny Peskin. Worst comes to worst, give us a call. If you can't find something online or calling folks up, we'll help you out.
Awesome. Thank you.
oh, absolutely.
I got another one. I don't want to keep asking questions here. If anyone else has one, raise your hand or take yourself off mute and ask. But I've got another one if no one else does. Okay, so my other question is, there seems to be a bit of a dance that we have to do with zoning officials and inspectors, where sometimes they'll ask us to do something that is not in their code. And it's clearly not in their code. And rather than fighting with them about it and getting a bad mark, you know, in the future, not being easy to work with, we just do it. But sometimes what they'll ask is difficult to do. We have, my team is working on a project right now in Coral Springs where they have come back with, I would say, a dozen different items that were not originally in their code. And it's like tough, you have to do it. And is there a way that we should go about it when we're asked to do something that's clearly not in the code, where we're not going to, because our client in this instance, it's been months before we can even start the permitting process because we're waiting for approvals from different zoning agents. Do you guys have a recommendation when we run into brick walls like that on how to deal with it?
Well, that's a really good question, Matt. Thanks for that question. I would say, first of all, it may not be in the code. It could be a policy that's not in the code. So it could be something like that. And the first thing I would suggest, and I know you don't want to burn bridges, and because you've got to come back with another permit down the road probably. So I totally understand you want to try to work with them somehow. But I would say, ask them to tell you where this requirement is, what section of the code, or it could be a policy. Because sometimes, on a rare occasion, I'll see some submittal requirements that aren't in the code that are a part of the submittal application. I would call them out on it in a kind way. In other words, where is this? And if you're running into situations that are really difficult, you can bring us in too. And we'd be more than happy to try to resolve it, because they really should not be making any submittal requirements or whatever they're doing that's not in the code or a part of an official policy, especially when it's one that causes real havoc. I mean, they shouldn't be doing it at all. But I would say call them out on it in a way that is respectful, but you still got to ask them, where is this coming from? And if they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, I would go to whoever to try to get that to go away. I would go above, because you should not be in a position where you have to spend your time and money on something like that.
Matt, is this an electrical code issue?
It is. There was multiple, so it had to go through the hands of like 8 different reviewers, and each one had notes and would not pass it on to the next one until we cleared up the things with each one. So it literally took weeks in between each one. So we were like 2-3 months, but electrical was part of it. Yes.
Right. So that's an issue that Kenny Peskin is our specialist on NEC type issues. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk offline about that. I will say that in general, that code interpretations from authorities having jurisdiction, or AHJs, are a source of constant frustration for sign companies, right? Probably for several reasons. Just talking high level here is that one is that the NEC is different editions of the NEC are adopted on a state-by-state basis. So you can have neighboring states that often have different editions of the NEC enforced. I'm not sure if that's much of a problem in Coral Springs, but so then you have an example of sometimes the rules in one NEC edition can be directly at odds with those in a previous NEC edition. And then you have AHJs that have different, that know different editions and are applying different standards, which we've seen happen before. And sometimes the authority having jurisdiction, the electrical inspector just doesn't know the code accurately in the instance that it needs to be applied. Mm-hmm. And so, that's just a high level view of the problems that are involved. And I can, without knowing too much more of your particular problem, Matt, just let us know, and then we'll have Kenny take a look at it. But just in general, for all Southern States members, is that we definitely have the expertise in-house to help with NEC or UL issues or any sort of nationally recognized testing laboratories on the electrical issues that are involved with signs. We might not have your answers, but turn to us and we can give you some assistance on it. That's what we're here for.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for being a part of it. And thank you, especially James and David, for talking with us today and giving us your insight. We really appreciate all you being on the call. As a reminder, we'd like to do this every other month. So if you have a topic you want addressed, shoot me an email or shoot us an email, and we'd love to discuss it in the future. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you all have a great afternoon.
So long. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. See you in September.